Whispers through history speak of a tome, a book, a grimoire of legend. Within its pages are said to be the hidden cartography of history, both of the past and the future. Grimmer are the words that line the pages of this grimoire, and the events that unfold within this book hold between them the truth. Page 106, Insight. Cameras snapped in unison and their flashes spattered off of faces and walls in a room crowded with people. Sitting in organized rows of seats were men and women clad in business attire. Many held their cell phones towards the front of the room in hopes of recording everything that was being said. The man who had all of their attention was very well kept. He was fair-skinned and cleanly shaved. His hair is kept combed and gelled away from his face. He has piercing green eyes which looked down at the dozens of faces in the crowd. And down from his face was his expensive attire. A very neat and clean designer suit. His shoes matched the suit in expense, as did his wristwatch, which shined brightly with each flash of the cameras. The man whose name was plastered towards the crowd on a placard is Thomas Kedner. He is the Public Relations Officer of the Mechanical Advancements and Scientific Technologies Corporation. Placing his left hand onto the podium, Thomas began to speak to the crowd of men and women seated in front of him. That outlines all of the news for this quarter. We'll have more information about everything that was announced today sometime next week. Thanks for coming out, ladies and gentlemen, he said while smiling for the last few shots of the cameras. Voices erupted from around the crowd just as he finished his last sentence. Most of those voices had questions about the announcements that he had just made. Thomas was a veteran of the company and of his job. He knew how to navigate both the difficult questions and the baited statements commonly spewed by certain journalists. He was always very persuasive to the cameras and the ears of those who were listening to his every word. He was extremely confident in every remark that he made, until a question shouted loudly from the back of the room blasted his ears and the ears of the others like an explosion. It was a question that even he wasn't ready to answer. "Mr. Kedner, people want to know about the rumored Project Chrome. Tell us about that." Thomas seemed just as confused as the rest of the crowd, who all went silent as the question was asked. They all turned their attention towards him. "Well, I've never heard of that. And the company doesn't comment on rumors. So sorry to whoever asked that, but I don't have an official response." Flagging down the remainder of the crowd, Thomas notified them that the press conference was over and that they were free to leave. As he walked from the podium, he slipped his hand into his right pocket and pulled out his cell phone. He had many recent notifications, most were from his colleagues. He ignored those messages and opened his email inbox instead. This was not the officially assigned email that the business had given to him. This email was under a different username and on a different account. Scrolling through the inbox, he didn't seem to find what he was expecting to see. He placed his phone back into his pocket. He walked outside of the conference room and over to the elevators, where he pressed the call button. The elevator arrived and he stepped inside, placing his finger on the number 7, which was the floor that his office resided on. Once inside of the elevator, he again took his phone from his pocket. Looking through his email a second time, he opened the inbox and smiled when he noticed he had a new message from someone named Anon. Quickly he placed his phone back into his pocket. He knew the elevators had cameras and microphones inside of them, and it wouldn't be good for himself or Anon if they had gotten caught. Arriving on the 7th floor and stepping out of the elevator, he walked down the hallway and into his office. He closed his door and locked it. He took a seat at his desk, where he again took out his phone to read the email. The message he had received was brief. It only stated that his interview today was very interesting, but specifically the end of it. What was most intriguing to Anon was the question about Project Chrome. Thomas had felt uneasy, especially considering that he had no idea what the project was. He responded to the email telling Anon that he would look into the project, and when the time comes he'll send whatever information he can get their way. Thomas wasn't the man he portrayed himself as in the public eye. To the public he was the charismatic PRO who was always well-groomed and flamboyant. But in reality he was a man who sold corporate secrets to his circle of various buyers, and all to generate big headlines in the media. This is what truly funded his lifestyle. After sending the email, he logged out of the account and placed his phone on his desk. Realizing the amount of work he had ahead of him, he began searching immediately, waking his desktop from sleep mode and logging into a specific company account that gave him access to hidden files. The search began for this project called Chrome. Thomas searched and searched through many folders and files for 3 hours. He eventually became tired of the repetition and decided to look through one last folder. Opening the folder, he observed the names of various in-development projects. He muttered their names under his breath: Project Fringe. No, Ghoul. No, Engineered Version 52 Network. That's definitely not it. Thomas squinted his eyes in angst as he continued to scroll through the project names. Project Apollo. No, Project Red Dye Chrome. This is it, he said while clicking into the folder. It opened and displayed a list of files, each of which had numbers and labels. Thomas began to get heavily drawn into some of the profiles of the people, until a loud knock struck his office door. It caught him by surprise and made him jump quite highly out of his seat. He shouted at the door, "Give me 1 second," while quickly logging out of the company's account and placing his PC back into rest mode. Walking over to the door, he opened it and looked down where a package sat on the floor. Picking up the package, he closed the door and sat the box on a chair that was next to the door. Arseholes could have shouted that it was just a delivery, he said as he returned to his seat and restarted his computer. For the next hour, Thomas browsed through the project files until what he was reading had become entirely unbelievable. "Shit like this just isn't possible," he said to himself, still staring at the computer screen. Having seen enough, he closed out of the computer and stood up. Walking out of his office, he made sure to grab the package off of the chair and headed home. When he arrived home, he walked into his bedroom and placed the package on the floor by his bed. Tapping the light switch, his room illuminated and revealed a luxurious setting. Wasting no time, he removed his tie, and then his blazer. Methodically, he undressed to his socks and underwear. After fully undressing, he entered his walk-in shower and relaxed himself, allowing the steaming hot water to run over his head and down his body. He laid the back of his head on the marble tiles lining his shower and closed his eyes, thinking to himself as the water continued to run its way over his face: prisoners, test subjects, artificial. None of this is possible. Is it? Frantically, he asked himself in his head, still wondering or moreover worrying about the mysteries of this new project that he had read about. After roughly 25 minutes, he shut off his shower and stepped out, reaching for his towel. Drying himself off, he then proceeded to brush his teeth and neatly comb his hair. Walking back into his bedroom, still in just a towel, he sat on his bed. Something then began to bother him. He could hear a strange sound, beeping, but it also sounded like a hum which was very low but still audible. "What is that?" he asked himself while looking around his bedroom. He tried his hardest to figure out what the sound was and where it was coming from. Without warning and in an instant, the lights in his bedroom dimmed. He jumped to his feet at alert and rushed over and into his closet to quickly put on some clothes. Emerging from his closet in his still dimly lit room, he could see that a bright white light was peering through the cracks of his bedroom door. He was certain that he had not turned on any other lights in his home. Then he could hear what sounded like boots and whispers echoing through his home. His heart began to race, unsure of what this situation was. Robbery? Or was it a home invasion? Why didn't my security alarm go off? He anxiously asked himself. In the midst of his paranoia and fear, he couldn't help but look at the floor where the package sat, which was still in the box that it was packaged in. For one reason or another, he kneeled down and began to tear open the packaging, without fear that the noise he was making would inevitably bring whoever was marching through his home to him. He gasped when he had seen what was inside: a red glowing light in the center of a metallic sphere. The sounds he had heard before were from whatever this was. Thomas tried to piece together what might be occurring. He realized that he may have gotten caught earlier when browsing the files on his computer, and that this thing could be something made by the company. And those phantoms making their way towards his bedroom were somehow connected to M.A.S.T. Before he could even panic from the realization, he heard a loud boom from his bedroom door, the sound of a boot kicking wood. He reached out to the sphere on his floor and touched it with his right hand. A bright light filled his eyes and he then began to lose consciousness. Opening his eyes, he slowly lifted his hands over them to shield them from the light that was swirling around the room. At first, what he could see was blurry and unclear. He squinted his eyes, trying to focus more until he could see clearly. "Oh shit," he mumbled under his breath while looking at the emblem embroidered on the wall of the room. The room was mostly empty, except for the wooden table he sat at, and the emblem on the wall. An emblem which bore the M.A.S.T. Corporation's symbol. "This must be detainment," he spoke aloud while standing on his feet. He walked over to the door of the room and jumbled with the doorknob, taking note that it was locked. When he turned around to face the table, something new had somehow made its way into the room. On the table sat a packet of papers. Thomas looked around the room carefully, trying to see how they could have suddenly appeared. He turned his attention to the corner of the room near the ceiling. A security camera sat motionless and silently. "Are they watching me in here?" he said to himself, waving his left arm into the air and towards the camera. He then raised his voice to speak to whoever was watching him. "Hey you guys, come in here and tell me what's going on." A few seconds went by and nothing happened. Thomas, growing frustrated, returned to the table and sat in the chair. He grabbed the papers and began to briefly read them. His heart sank as he read what the papers displayed. Private emails between him and Anon. "Oh God no," he said as he jumped to his feet and faced the camera. "Hey, let's talk about this, alright? Just come in here and let's discuss what's going on," he said ferociously. Click. The sound coming from behind him caught his attention, and he turned his body towards the door, anticipating someone to come in. After a few short seconds passed, he walked over to the door and again touched the doorknob. This time it was unlocked. Thomas turned his head to face the security camera and turned the knob, opening the door. Walking out and into the hallway, he recognized his location. "So I was right. This is detainment," he said in his head as he walked slowly up the hallway. Suddenly he heard a voice that startled him. "I'll help you," it said. Thomas stopped and looked around but couldn't see anyone. "Who's there?" he asked in fear that he had been caught. "Check your cell phone," the voice told him. Patting his pockets down, he realized that he indeed had his cell phone. "When did I get this?" he said. The voice spoke back to him. "Since they came and captured you." Thomas did not recognize the number that he was communicating with. He only knew that the voice was female. "I'll take all the help I can get," he told her. "Then get ready to do everything I tell you to do, Mr. Kedner. Because this won't be easy," she said back to him. Sweat began to roll from Thomas's now unkempt hair. But he understood the situation he was in and the potential consequences he was facing. If running meant he could control his own destiny, then he could see no shame in doing that. The law isn't friendly to insider trading or whistleblowers. "Are you ready to do exactly as I tell you?" asked the female voice to Thomas. He had taken refuge in a lobby and kneeled down near a corner in the room. "Yes, just help me get out of here," he stressed to her over the phone. "I don't see anyone in the lobby. Quickly, run over to the stairwell now. You're going to need to get a sec bracelet if you want to leave. I'm sure that you've noticed that you're not wearing yours," she mentioned to Thomas, who immediately looked at his wrist. "Yeah, I can see that," he told her, standing up to his feet and quickly walking over to the stairwell. "Wait," he whispered while looking up the stairwell. "What is it?" asked the woman. "What's stopping me from dialing 911? This is illegal. They can't just hold me here indefinitely. I don't have to be their hostage." He maniacally began to rant to the woman on the other end of the phone. "Oh, you're free to try it," she retorted sarcastically. "But it'll just be a waste of our time. This is M.A.S.T, Thomas. They have the means to control just about every aspect of tech that sets foot on their campus. And that includes your phone." Thomas pulled his phone from his pocket anyway and proceeded to dial 911. Nothing but a dial tone echoed from his phone. "This is insane," he told the woman. She began to instruct him more aggressively to head up the stairs and into the right side hallway. Thomas maneuvered his way through the hallway and eventually made it to a small office room that was numbered Sec J87. Peeping inside of the room, he didn't see anyone. He began to question why he hadn't seen a single person this entire time. "What the hell is going on?" he said aloud while walking into the office room. Inside of the room were computer monitors which displayed camera feeds of the entire M.A.S.T campus. "You're inside of a security surveillance room. Look around for a sec bracelet," the woman told him through the phone. Thomas placed the phone on the desk by the monitors and began looking through the drawers in the office. He searched but couldn't find a bracelet. Turning to face the computer screens, he noticed that all of them displayed familiar places on the campus but without any people. It was an empty campus. Looking at the corner of the monitor, he could see that the time read 2:15 a.m., which would mean that he had been taken around 4 hours ago. He took a seat in the chair directly in front of the monitors and grabbed his phone. He told the woman that there were no bracelets in the room. "You have to check again. There has to be one in there. It's the security room, for God's sake," she explained to him. Thomas turned in the chair and looked at the floor just beneath the coat hanger where he luckily noticed a bracelet. "I found one," he shouted while reaching to grab it. "Good, you'll need to head back downstairs and through the hallway where you exited the room," she said. This time he walked comfortably and confidently downstairs back towards the room he had awoken in. "All right, I'm here," he told the women. "Straight ahead there's a double-lined door, use the bracelet and head outside. Once you're outside you'll need to go into the tech circle. When you're inside of there we can figure out the situation." Thomas walked up to the double doors but halted before using the bracelet to open them. "I have to ask you some things first," he said to her in a monotone voice. "Now isn't the best time," she replied back. "No, this is the best time," he said with emphasis. "Since there's no one around but you and me. So tell me who you are. Give me a name, or something so I'll know who I'm talking to," he asked her, only to be met with brief silence. "Is it that important?" she questioned back to him. "Yes, it is actually. Are you an employee? Maybe someone I know from outside of work?" She continued her brief silence a little more before opening up to him. "My name is Evelyn. And yes, I do work here, but that's all you really need to know. If they find out I'm helping you it'll be even worse for me than what they have planned for you." Thomas began to think hard about the different people he met while working at the company. "Evelyn? Have we ever met? I don't remember ever hearing that name," he said to her, placing his hands on his waist in thought. "Are you sure you've never met me? I can remember you pretty easily," she timidly said back to him. Thomas did have a moment of familiarity with her name. Perhaps she was one of the new internees hired over the winter, many of whom he overlooked or sought after for immoral and selfish purposes. "I think I may actually remember seeing your name somewhere recently. I think on the intern list," he said while still pondering. "Either way, I'm here to help you. Now you have to hurry and open the doors before someone comes." Thomas walked to the doors and placed the bracelet against the doorknob, which unlocked it. Opening the door, he walked out on the asphalt. The campus was dark but illuminated with many lamps and lights spread around. The moon was brightly stationed just above his head. He was finally out of detainment, but he couldn't shake the odd feeling he had since he'd awoken in that room. A baleful feeling. He placed his feelings aside and cautiously made his way to the tech center, which sat just a moderate walk away.